This is the story The Missing Gator of Gumbo Limbo by Jean Craighead George. This is a map of where the characters live in the story. Chapter 1 Missing. On a warm, sun-spangled day, a reedy man in a tan cap walked into the woods. I was fishing for bass in Gumbo Limbo Hole and listening to the trade winds chime through the leaves of the royal palm. I didn't see him until he spoke. "Missy," he said, "have you seen the big alligator that lives in this lake?" "You mean Dejun?" I asked enthusiastically as I reeled in my line. "I don't know what his name is," the man said. "All I know is that he's 10 feet long." "That's got to be Dejun," I said, looking up into a sun-beaten face and keen eyes peering out from under the cap like an armadillo's under his bony armor. "Only he's 12 feet long, not 10. I checked my bait, saw it had been chewed off, and put on another shrimp. I cast far out into the winking surface of the lake. "Come to think of it," I said when my sinker hit bottom, "I haven't seen him for a couple of days." That was odd. Dejun was always around. He was part of the waterscape at Gumbo Limbo Hole. He would bask on his beach in the morning and bask again in the heat of the afternoon in the cool water, his back, head, and tail exposed to the sun. The rest of the time he was watching for careless fish, turtles, birds, and beasts, with only his eyes and nose above the surface of the water. Dejun was swampland royalty. I scanned the lake. He was nowhere to be seen. "The pest control department hired me," the man said. "I'm here to shoot him." "Shoot him!" I all but shouted. "You can't do that. Alligators are protected by law." "Not when they get over 8 feet." He touched the pistol on his hip and sized me up. He took in my 5 feet 1 inches, my head of brown corkscrew curls, my freckles, and my blue eyes. He smacked his lips. "The one I'm after can eat a small girl like you in one gulp." I shrugged to say I didn't believe him. "I know he could," he insisted. "I'm an alligator hunter. Made my living hunting these critters until they passed that law about protecting them." "But Dejun's not eating anyone," I said. "People over there in the condos," he gestured toward the development on the other side of the pineland, "filed a complaint. They're afraid of him. I'm surprised to see you here. Ain't you scared?" "Dejun's not vicious," I answered, and was about to tell him how a man named James and I fed the big alligator the snapping turtles we caught in an underwater trap. The turtles kept Dejun fat and happy. I decided not to tell him. This man was an official. I lived in the woods right behind where we were standing. I lived there with Mom and 3 other people. Outsiders called us the woods people. In Florida, the weather is so nice that homeless people can camp in the woods. By nature, we all feel uncomfortable around officials. Our group had never been told to leave, but that's because nobody knew where we lived in these woods. Word of the terrible Dejun kept people away. He was the dragon protecting our gate. As unobtrusively as I could, I searched under the cocoa plum branches that hung out over the water. I was looking for the huge woody knots that are Dejun's eyes and nose. I couldn't find them, and hoped he was on the bottom of the lake. He might well have been. The official was carrying a gun. A person who carries a gun acts aggressively. Animals sense this and disappear. Last week, a policeman with a gun rounded the hole. Dejun sank, and closing the water above him without a ripple, was gone. The official, Travis, at least that's what his name embroidered on his green shirt, watched me reel in my line and cast again. "Pretty good for a girl," he said. Such uneducated statements made Mom and me furious, but I said nothing. I didn't want to start an argument that would hold him there 1 minute longer than needed be. I bit my tongue and cast again. Travis went about his work. He walked around the jungly shore of Gumbo Limbo Hole as best he could. He finally stopped where the prickleweed grew tall. There he scanned the water surface. From where he stood, he could see the entire hole or lake, whatever you prefer to call our 2 acres of crystal water. He could see all kinds of birds, coots, gallinules, an anhinga, and 2 great egrets, but not the alligator. Travis made some notes in a notebook and came back. Is that Dejeune's sunning spot over there? He asked. He pointed to the white, gently sloping beach that the alligator had made by sliding in and out of the water. I told him it was, but right away I was sorry I had. All this man had to do was stand where he was long enough, and Dejeune would eventually come ashore to bask in the winter sunshine. I cast again, then searched the dark lily pads for Dejeune's nose. He's hard to see when he's in the pads because his nostrils are open and dark as the leaves. He closes them when he dives. 3 feet back are the nostrils, would be the horny coverings around his yellow eyes. Together with his nose, they make a triangle of bumps on the top of the water. They say alligator. Only when it's very cold does he stick just his nose out, and cold weather is rare in southern Florida. Dejeune wasn't in the lily pads. Travis fingered his gun. Desperately I plotted. He might be in the cypress stand, I said, pointing to a distant grove where I had never seen him. The herons are hunting a frog hatch in there. Gators like herons. Could be there if there's enough water, Travis said. I'll take a look. Slowly fighting his way around the dense cocoa plums and the stiff leaves of saw palmettos, he reached the cypress stand and disappeared. He was gone a long time. I caught 2 nice bass before he returned looking discouraged, his green shirt ripped by the jungle's claws. He was also sweating. Find him? I asked. Nah. I made no comment, but I knew my face showed such glee that I was forced to bend my head. A disgruntled Travis walked a few steps to a log covered with resurrection ferns, the kind that wither when it's dry and revive when it rains. The ferns were withered because it was December, the dry season in Florida. They crackled when he sat down. There's a reward for anyone who can lead me to him, he said, handing me a card with his name and telephone number on it. You come here often? Just now and then, I said cagily. I guess a young lady like you could use a reward. He was looking at the holes in my shirt. How much is it? I asked. $100. I leaned down and tied my sneaker, trying to act as if it were nothing. I hoped the other woods people wouldn't learn about this. $100 would buy Priscilla a lot of those mini gin bottles she collected. Caruso might like to have $100 since he's a concert singer and must have opera clothes. James wouldn't want the reward. Money doesn't mean much to him. He walks everywhere and gets his clothes from the poor people's shelter. I was getting nervous. Dejeune might surface any minute. He'd been under a long time. Also, Travis might look for Dejeune in the woods, although alligators rarely, if ever, go into the woods, and he must know that. But the thought of him entering for any reason at all made me bite my nails. Mom and my home was there. He might find it and report us. We have to move to the shelter for the homeless. That happened to Caruso once, and he never got over it. Mom says we are not homeless. We are just on vacation until she can buy a house. I put the official's card in my pocket. Sir, I said pleasantly, do you know what time it is? He looked at his watch. 5 o'clock. Oh, wow, I've got to get home. I reeled in my line, hook and sinker. By the way, sir, I said meekly, you say Dejeune is dangerous? Very dangerous, he replied. He can kill. Seen a fellow chewed legless by one smaller than that one. Really? I put on my most helpless expression. I've seen him on the trail from time to time. Would you mind walking me to the road? I'll be glad to, he replied, and took off his cap to wipe the perspiration from his forehead. He had very blue eyes, and the hair that stuck out from under his cap was sunburned a bright yellow. The hair protected by his cap was dark brown. He looked like a chocolate-covered vanilla cupcake. Besides, he went on, I've been here since sunup, and I haven't seen even one gator eye. I'll post a reward notice. Someone will see him and call me. He took out a black marking pen, wrote on a sheet of notebook paper, and tacked it on the royal palm. Okay, Fisher gal, he said, let's go. I picked up my stringer of fish, my rod, and the bait box, and walked behind Travis. Once we were out of the woods, we followed Gumbo Limbo trail through low bushes and grass to find the road. You'll be all right now, he said, smiling for the first time. That gator won't get you here. Road's too hot. Thank you, I said, and started walking towards the condominiums. When I heard Travis's car accelerate, I turned right around and ran back to the Royal Palm, tore down the reward sign, and stuffed it in my pocket. I was certain it had not been seen. I had been gone only 10 minutes. Back at my fishing spot, I looked for Dejun, but still could not find him. That was most unusual. Where was he? I did see that the turtle trap had gone off and was pleased with that. James and I could feed Dejun the turtle and he'd be quiet for a day or so. Smiling at the thought, I cleaned the fish and carried them home for supper. I took my long personal trail home. It winds off into the open land where I often see butterflies on the fire plants and rabbit tobacco, then crosses through the pine lands and enters the woods from the west. A few paces and it rounds a huge clump of leathered fern twice as tall as I am. Then I am home. Mom and I live in a yellow wall tent under the most beautiful live oak in Collier County. The oak is so big, Mom and I, even by holding hands, cannot reach each other around the tree. Its limbs would cover a tennis court. On its branches grow gardens of orchids and the sparkler-like plants and bright flowers called air plants or bromeliads. Butterflies hover over the flowers and birds chase the butterflies. Lizards chase the insects. You could watch the show in this tree all day. It's a theater of horror, suspense, and romance. Our oak is in a forest of tropical trees and bushes with names like bustic, pigeon plum, tallowwood, mastic, soapberry, and push and hold back. There are wild coffee trees and the edible cabbage palms. Mahogany trees, 3 feet in diameter, grow in the center of the woods. A black ironwood with wood so dense it will not float grows near our oak. The woods are called a hardwood or tropical hammock and shelter wonderful birds like the white-crowned pigeon and endangered species like the colorful tree snails. I learned all this from James, who says our hammock is a rare thing. We may be living in the only place like it on the whole revolving planet. The first night that Mom and I were in the woods, we stretched out on our sleeping bags in the yellow tent and listened to the great horned owl call to his mate. I was very happy. The owls talked back and forth, and the moonlight made leaf patterns on the tent roof. Then suddenly I grew afraid. Mom, I said, my voice shaking, is Daddy coming to live with us? No, Liza Kay, she answered. No, he is not. She got up and moved her sleeping bag beside me. Everything is going to be all right, she whispered. He will not come here. When we all three lived together, I did many terrible things for which my father hit me. Come here, Liza Catherine Poole, he would shout. I knew when he called me by my full name that I had done something awful, and I would tremble. When he had me punished and stormed away, I would cry and pray to be a better person. I also tried to write down what I had done so I would never do it again. I usually couldn't remember, which made me cry even more. One night, after my father had punished me very hard and stormed out of the house, Mom came to me as she usually did. She rocked me in her arms. Tomorrow, Liza Kay, she said, her voice very strong and sure, you and I are going on a vacation to a beautiful place. You have done nothing wrong, my darling child. You must understand that, do you? I wasn't sure I did. The next day, we came to the woods. Mom, her name is Charlotte Ann Poole, put up the wall tent she had kept from the days when she had camped with her father. She hung orchids at the door and rolled 2 stones side by side to make a table for her Coleman stove. I put my butterfly jars and nets in the corner of the tent and my fishing rod against the oak. When Mom had put our clothes in 2 cardboard boxes at the foot of our sleeping bags, she placed a candle on a wooden box between them. She said candles looked like glowworms in the woods and would not draw attention to our home. At sundown, we sat outside the tent on stones rolled up to our orange crate table. I shall never forget that night. The light from the setting sun turned the woods into a golden temple. Liza Kay, Mom said, looking up, we will start a new life under this beautiful tree, just you and me. She clasped her fingers together and looked around. My father and I lived here long ago after my mother died. She ran her hands through her hair. We moved back into town after he bought his shrimp boat, but we would come back here to camp and fish when the season was over. He planned to bring you here when you grew up, but he died when you were still very young. She reached over and took my hand. He and I were peaceful here. The owl called again. A woods is healing. I nodded. You'll be pretty much on your own, she went on. I have just taken a job waiting tables at night at the diner, and I'm going to business school in the morning. When I finish, I'll get a good job and buy a nice house. She pulled me to her feet and we walked into the tent to get ready for bed. It was quite late when we lay down by the soft glow of the candle. Liza Kay, Mom said when she saw I was awake. Maybe I'll buy that little house under the royal poinsettia tree on Japonica Street, the white house with the tile patio. Remember? It has 2 bedrooms, one for each of us. I was thinking about my father. He didn't know where we were. Remember it, Liza Kay? She said with a lit in her voice. She blew out the candle. I took you there once. It had a bright blue bathroom and a kitchen window that looks out on a papaya and a wild cinnamon tree. I didn't remember it, possibly because I didn't care about a house as much as Mom did. I was so very peaceful in the woods in our cozy yellow tent where my father couldn't take off his belt and beat me.